Hello everyone. Tonight, I've got a batch of chilling tales to share with you. But before we dive in, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me keep creating even better content. Now, sit back, relax, and join me as we embark on this eerie journey together. I always thought the old house on Maple Street was abandoned until I moved in. I'd leased the place sight unseen, charmed by its low rent and classic brick facade. When I first stepped inside on a rainy October afternoon, the air smelled stale like dust and old fabric. Sunlight trickled through grimy windows, illuminating motes that danced in the gloom. I shrugged off the chill and set about unpacking. On day 2, I discovered the door. It was hidden behind an old bookshelf in the living room, its dark wood blending seamlessly with the shelves. The door had no handle, only a keyhole rusted shut. Curious, I pried at the wood until the hinges groaned. Beyond it lay a narrow stairwell winding downward. Cold air rushed up to welcome me. I felt a brief flicker of dread, but shrugged it off. The internet said it was a coal chute or a root cellar. I'd poke around later. That night I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard the scraping again the stairwell. Cautiously, I padded to the living room in my socks. The door was ajar. The bookshelf moved aside. The stairs stretched into pitch darkness. My heart pounded. I reached for my phone flashlight and crept down. Halfway, a whisper scraped my ear. "Don't go." I froze every hair on my neck standing. "Who's there?" I called, voice wavering. Silence. I sprinted back up, slammed the door, and wedged the bookshelf in front of it. My breath came in rasps. I lay awake until dawn. Daylight didn't help. My rational mind insisted I'd imagined it. But I noticed something odd. The bookshelf's shift had scratched the hardwood floor. Fresh gouges where none should be. And the door's keyhole had been oiled as if someone expected to lock it again. That afternoon, I borrowed a camera from a friend. "Let's get some proof," I joked, though my voice trembled. In the living room, I took photos of the door, then turned to frame the bookshelf when I saw her. She stood at the top of the stairs. Pale, no translucent, just the faintest silhouette of a girl maybe 6 years old. Her eyes were hollow black pits, and she watched me without blinking. My camera flash went off, and she vanished. Reviewing the shot, I froze behind the bookshelf. You could see the child's face pressed against the banister, mouth open as if screaming. It faded into the grain of the stairs. I showed the picture to my friend. She went pale and refused to stay the night. "You have to leave," she said. But I couldn't afford moving again. That night, the whisper returned louder. "Please." Not menacing, pleading. I crept toward the door, nudged the bookshelf aside, and this time I climbed without my phone. The air became increasingly frigid, turning my breath into mist. At the bottom, I reached a small room, bare except for a dusty cot and a single child's toy, a wooden horse broken leg. I knelt to pick it up, and my hand brushed a dark stain on the floor. It was damp, sticky. It smelled of decay. Then I heard footsteps, above slow and deliberate. Someone or something descending. My heart froze. I dropped the toy and ran up. At the top, I stumbled into the living room and flipped on every light. The front door was wide open. Rain spattered the floorboards. I slammed it shut, grabbed my keys, and fled. I called the landlord the next morning. He sounded confused. "There's no basement," he said. "That house had a root cellar decades ago, but it was filled in and sealed off. No one's opened that hatch in 50 years. I showed him the photos. He held them up to the phone and sighed. "I'll send someone to check." Later that day, 2 workmen arrived. They tore the bookshelf away. To my horror, there was no door, no stairwell, only solid plaster. No stained floor, no hinge marks, nothing. They apologized for the disturbance, sealed the wall, and left. My landlord paid me an extra month's rent to stay silent, but I knew better. Every night at precisely 2 a.m., the same sound begins the soft scuff of tiny footsteps behind the wall, the faint whine of a child's pleas. I still live here for now, but I dread the nights when I can't block out the whispers. Because I've learned that some doors, once found, never truly close. I've always been drawn to old buildings, their weathered walls whispering secrets of eras long past. So when I accepted the night shift caretaker position at the Waverly Manor Museum, I imagined myself uncovering dusty relics and preserving them for posterity. I did not imagine confronting a specter. Waverly Manor stood on the outskirts of town, a sprawling Victorian edifice converted into a museum. My duties were simple: patrol the halls every hour, ensure the artifacts remained undisturbed, and lock up at dawn. The previous caretaker, Mr. Ellington, left abruptly, muttering about her and refusing to explain. I thought it was an excuse. I was wrong. My first night passed quietly. I locked the heavy oak doors, secured the display cases, and began my rounds. At midnight, I made my way down the East Wing corridor lined with portraits of Waverly's long-dead aristocrats. My flashlight beam danced across satin dresses, stern faces, gilt frames. I paused before the portrait of Lady Miranda Waverly, whose alabaster cheeks and sorrowful eyes always unnerved me. She stared at me as if she knew my name. At 1:30 a.m., I checked the main gallery, then the children's exhibit. Everything was in order. When I returned to the East Wing at 2:00 a.m., I noticed something odd. The portrait of Lady Miranda was no longer facing forward. Its canvas had swiveled slightly on its hooks, the lady's sorrowful gaze now directed toward the far end of the corridor. Unease prickled my skin. I approached and straightened the frame, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me. I continued my rounds, trying to dismiss my growing anxiety. On my next pass at 3:00 a.m., I entered the dimly lit hallway and froze. At the far end, a white gown drifted silently. My breath caught in my throat. The figure glided toward me, limbs too fluid to be human. My mind screamed to run, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. As she drew closer, I recognized her Lady Miranda. Her face was pale, almost translucent. Her dark hair floated around her head like a halo of mist. Her eyes, those sorrowful, bottomless black eyes, burned with an otherworldly light. I stuttered her name as though that were an anchor to reality. She held out a single finger, beckoning me. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. "What do you want?" My voice barely rose above a whisper. She stopped a few feet away, tilting her head. Her lips parted, revealing teeth that glowed faintly in the flashlight's beam. "Return her," she breathed, voice like distant wind through hollow halls. Before I could respond, she vanished. The corridor was empty, but the air quivered with her departure. I shook off the terror and pressed on, determined to finish my rounds. At 4:00 a.m., I reached the antiques room. That's where the old music box was displayed, silver, filigree, hand-cranked, delicate as a dream. The placard said it had belonged to Lady Miranda herself. According to museum lore, she had died in childbirth, her flesh ridden with grief, her husband driven mad. The box was said to play a tune that echoed a mother's lament. The display case was shattered. Glass shards littered the floor. The music box lay on its side, wind-up key broken off. My heart sank. Someone or something had smashed it. I know. I knelt to inspect the damage and froze. Scrawled across the display plaque in what looked like charcoal were the words, "She cries for me." My phone's radio crackled, my only lifeline. I fumbled with the buttons until I heard the dispatcher's voice. I swallowed hard. "There's been an incident in Exhibit C. I need assistance. Possible break-in." No reply. The static grew louder until it drowned the world. Then over the roar, I heard the faint tinkle of music, slow, haunting like a lullaby, sung in a language lost to time. I looked around. The box hadn't been playing. My flashlight beam danced over the floor, over the broken box, and then up the wall onto the portrait of Lady Miranda once again. Her eyes now glowed a sickly green. The radio snapped silent. The corridor lights flickered. I backed away from the shattered glass and bolted for the nearest exit door. Every step echoed unnaturally loud. As I reached the door, the lullaby crescendoed, filling my ears until I thought my skull might split. I tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. I pounded with my fist. "Let me out!" Tears stung my eyes. The lullaby stopped, replaced by a child sobbing soft. At first, then growing in volume until it was a keening wail. It was coming from behind me. I spun to face the corridor and saw her Lady Miranda standing before the portrait, cradling an invisible infant. Her dress was torn, her hair matted with what looked like dried blood. The infant's sobs echoed in the vacant hall. "I need her," Miranda whispered. Eyes brimming with grief, so deep it clawed at my soul. "She needs me." I stumbled backward, trying to find words. Something in her voice shattered a dam inside me. Compassion warred with terror. "Where is she?" I croaked. Miranda's head snapped toward me. "Return her to me." Behind her, at the portrait's edge, I saw a small cradle, painted into the background tiny wheels and ornate carvings. The cradle in the painting was empty, but now I thought I saw movement, a small hand reaching out. I realized then that the music box hadn't belonged only to Miranda. It was her daughter's lullaby, the bond that tethered her spirit to this world. Without it, her child was lost. With trembling hands, I scooped up the broken music box. The lullaby began again, slower, more rhythmic. Miranda advanced, and the child's sobs turned to giggles. "Kasip!" Pressed the box's gears together, and with a click, the tune softened. I closed my eyes and turned the crank. The melody swelled, filling the corridor with its bittersweet notes. When I opened my eyes, the corridor was silent. The shattered display case had mended itself. Glass shards reassembled and vanished. The portrait of Lady Miranda now hung perfectly centered, her eyes calm. The painted cradle held a sleeping infant, peaceful in slumber. I still held the music box, its gears clicking softly. I placed it back in its case and stepped away. The corridor light steadied. The exit door clicked open. I fled to the security office and locked myself in until dawn. That morning, the museum board found the case intact, the music box unharmed, and no sign of forced entry. I told them nothing of the lady in white, nothing of the sobbing child. They tipped me extra for reporting the broken display, and I handed over the music box for restoration. But I know what I saw. Every night, I still patrol Waverly Manor. When I pass the East Wing corridor at 3:00 a.m., I pause before Lady Miranda's portrait. If I'm quiet, I swear I can hear the faint staccato of the lullaby, and somewhere behind the hall's closed doors, a child's laughter. I've spent my fair share of nights in creaky inns and roadside motels, chalking up strange noises to thin walls and thin mattresses. But nothing prepared me for Room 13 at the Crescent Falls Inn. I arrived on an autumn evening, weary from a long drive through winding mountain roads. The front desk clerk, a gaunt woman with hollow eyes, handed me the key with a tremor in her fingers and whispered, "Mind the mirror." I laughed it off as superstition and went up to my room. Room 13 was at the end of a narrow hallway, the wallpaper peeling like old scabs, the corridor lights flickering. A faded brass plate marked the door. I opened it to find a modest room, a twin bed draped in a shabby quilt, a wooden wardrobe, and an antique vanity against the far wall. Above the vanity hung a tall, ornate mirror, its heavy frame carved with twisting vines and thorny roses. The glass was oddly dark, as if it reflected nothing. I set my bags down and inspected the mirror. My reflection stared back, pale, under the dim lamp. But as I moved, the mirror lagged for a fraction of a second, too slow, too smooth, like a film projection stuttering. I shook off the chill and unpacked. Later that night, I lay awake, listening to the rain pattering against the window. Just past midnight, there was a soft tapping at the mirror's edge. I bolted upright as 3 clear knocks echoed in the room. My heart thudded. I switched on the lamp and stared at the mirror. The glass shimmered, and in its depths, I thought I saw a shape move behind me. My breath caught. I whipped around empty room. When I faced the mirror again, my reflection was gone, replaced by darkness. A cold breeze washed over me. Though the window was closed, the tapping came again, insistent. I inched forward, heart pounding. "Who's there?" I called, voice hoarse. Silence. Then from the mirror, a low sigh rolled out like distant thunder. I scrambled for my phone and switched on the flashlight app. The beam trembled across the mirror's surface. Behind its reflection, I could now make out the dim outline of a figure, a woman in a tattered dress, hair loose and wild, standing in an empty room I didn't recognize. Her eyes were sunken hollows. Her mouth hung open in a mute scream. My blood ran cold. I stumbled back. The woman raised a hand and pressed it against the glass on my side. It landed as a cold, wet spot on the mirror's surface. I watched the water bead and drip down the glass, leaving dark rivulets across the frame. Then the shape in the reflection leaned forward, face contorted with rage, and the glass seemed to ripple like water. I dropped the phone. The mirror flashed back to normal, and my reflection reappeared pale, wide-eyed, drenched in sweat. I didn't sleep. I sat in the bathroom until dawn, the door locked, breathing shallow. When morning came, I dared to glance at the mirror. It was pristine, the drops and rivulets vanished. My reflection stared back exhausted. I packed quickly and headed for the desk, but the clerk's face twisted when I asked to check out. "You can't," she whispered, eyes darting to the hallway. "Not till she's finished." Alarmed, I pushed past her, but at the end of the hall, the carpet was soaked. I froze. Wet footprints led from room 13 to the stairwell. I followed them, my shoes squelching with each step. The prints were small, childlike, but soaked in something dark and sticky. Fear propelled me downstairs. The receptionist locked the front door behind her. "She's in the mirror," the clerk said, voice low. "Made of water and sorrow. You can't leave until she's had company." My pulse thundered. I wrenched at the door. It wouldn't budge. I ran back upstairs, ignoring the clerk's pleas to stop. Pounding echoed behind me like someone or something chasing. I skidded to room 13 and locked myself inside. The door shook as if pounded by fists. I edged to the vanity and stared at the mirror. Nothing. But in the silence, I heard a soft voice whisper, "Let me out." I refused. "Get out of my mind," I yelled. My reflection's lips moved in sync, but the eyes were darker, deeper. Then the woman appeared again in the glass, floating in that unknown room. Her edges rippled. She pressed her face against the inside of the mirror and spoke through the barrier. I was lost, trapped. Her voice cracked through the glass. "Bring me home." I slammed my fist against the mirror, and for a moment it felt wet and pliable, like punching water. I recoiled as the glass shivered. The scream that erupted from the mirror was inhuman, tearing at my ears until I covered them and stumbled back. The glass fractured, spreading fine spiderweb cracks across its surface. But it did not shatter. Then everything went quiet. The cracks glowed a dull red. My reflection blacked out, and the woman stepped through. I can't explain what happened next. One moment, she was behind the glass. The next, she stood in my room, eyes blazing with rage and sorrow intertwined. Her dress hung in damp strands. She raised her arms, and the air grew cold enough to frost my breath. I ran past the bed, through the doorway, tripping over the threshold. She followed silent footsteps right behind me. I burst into the hall, but the hallway stretched impossibly long doors, multiplying on either side. Shouts of past guests echoed, but no one came. Behind me, the woman's sobbing deep resonant echoing off the walls. I ran until my lungs burned, but there was no exit, only more doors and more steps. Finally, I reached a plain wooden door marked "Staff Only." In desperation, I threw it open and stumbled into a cramped storage closet. I closed the door and braced myself, heart racing. Outside, footsteps stopped. The sobbing ceased. The door handle rattled once, then all was silent. I waited until dawn. When the sky first lightened, I emerged. The hallway was empty, pristine. No shattered mirror, no damp footprints. I found the clerk and demanded my key back. She hesitated, then handed it over, her expression blank. I fled the Crescent Falls Inn without looking back. I've tried to forget that night, erasing the dreams, the stutter in my reflection, the pleading voice in the dark. But late at night, when the wind rattles my windows, I still see her in every reflective surface in the glass of my phone, the window pane, the polished metal of my coffee maker. And always, always, her whisper follows, "Let me out." Never believed in ghosts? Until that summer, I took the temporary post at Black Rock Point Lighthouse. The official reason Chief Keeper Walsh was on medical leave for 6 weeks, and they needed someone to maintain the light. Unofficially, the lighthouse stood abandoned for decades at the tip of a jagged peninsula. Its reputation more myth than fact, but I, eager for solitude and extra pay, didn't care about rumors. On my first night, I climbed the narrow spiral stairs to the lantern room just before dusk, oil can in hand. The wind off the Atlantic was fierce, whipping salty spray against the windows. Below, the rocks glistened like wet granite teeth. I lit the lamp and double-checked the mechanism. All quiet. I settled in to log the readings, feeling oddly buoyant in that roaring solitude. At 2:17 a.m., the radio crackled unexpectedly. Not the automatic status check, something personal. "Emily," a trembling female voice whispered. I froze. The lighthouse log showed no registered Emily, and Chief Walsh's daughter hadn't lived here in 60 years. "Hello," I answered, voice tight. Silence. Then a low sob. The voice continued, as if against her will, "Papa, the storm's coming." Static swallowed her next words. My heart quickened, but logic kicked in. Someone must have found the radio tuner. I jotted down the time and returned to sleep. 2 nights later, the storm arrived. Winds howled like banshees. Waves crashed against the cliff with bone-shaking force. I secured doors and windows, but by 1 a.m. I could barely hear myself think. The lamp's flame flickered unpredictably, and the power generator groaned. I climbed to the lantern platform to stoke the wick and saw her. She stood on the cliff's edge, beyond the glass, a little girl in a white dress, plastered to her body, hair whipping around her face. She held something in her arms, an old sailor's cap, yellowed and brittle. Her eyes glowed faintly in the lantern's light, 2 coils of phosphorescent grief. "Emily," I whispered, remembering the voice. Her lips parted in a silent cry. She raised the cap, pressed it against the glass. The entire tower rattled as though a great force pushed against it. Wind tore at me, yet inside the lantern room, it was unnaturally still, as if the storm respected her presence. I backed away, heart pounding. The last thing I remember, before passing out, was her tiny hand scraping across the glass, leaving a wet trail. I awoke at dawn, curled on the metal floor. The storm had passed, but the generator was dead, and the lamp snuffed out. Shaken, I descended and found Chief Walsh waiting at the door, pale as sea foam. "You heard her, didn't you?" he asked, voice trembling. I blinked. "She called me Emily." His lips quivered. "Not you, Emily. My Emily." He led me into the keeper's quarters and showed me a faded photograph of a little girl in a white dress clutching her sailor father's cap. Beside it lay a broken radio handset identical to the one in the lantern room. "My daughter," he said. "She slipped out during a storm 60 years ago. I tried to call her name over and over on this radio, but the storm took her. I felt the walls close in. But you said the tower was unused for decades." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I never returned. Yet every storm, every June she calls." That afternoon, I attempted repairs. When I climbed the spiral stairs again, the wind was calm. Yet at 2:17 p.m., the radio crackled, Her tiny laugh squealed with delight. A staccato rap came on the hull, 3 taps, then 2. I recognized the pattern of childish knock-knock. I set down my tools and whispered, "Emily." Her sob followed. "Papa." The lights flickered. The cap lay on the floor behind me, though I had set it atop my tool bag. I froze. The air turned icily damp. Slowly, the lantern flame flared to life on its own, illuminating the lighthouse's circular gallery. Along the wall, water stains bloomed into the shape of a small girl, pressing her face against the glass. "Papa," she repeated, voice breaking. "The storm's coming for you." That night, I slept in fits. When the second storm rolled in at 2:17 a.m., I dreaded the knock on the lantern room door. Tap, tap, tap. I opened it, and she stood there, wide-eyed, dripping wet, holding the cap. A silent plea in her eyes. I held out a hand. "Emily, come home." She stepped forward, and all at once, the wind ceased. The lantern lamp dimmed to candlelight. Then, in a rush of cold air, she was gone, vanished, as if swallowed by the sea. The glass was dry. I found the cap gone too, though the wet footprint of her shoe remained on the wooden floor. Chief Walsh never returned. I left Black Rock Point the next morning, never taking the keeper's position again. But every time I hear a distant knock or a child's sob in the static of my radio, I remember Emily, lost between worlds, waiting for someone to guide her home before the next storm arrives. I was exhausted, bleary-eyed from cramming for finals when I decided to take the early morning bus back to my parents' house. My campus town was small and sleepy. The only bus stop near my dorm stood alone under a flickering lamp by an empty road. I arrived around 5:45 a.m., sat on the wooden bench, and waited. The lamp stuttered, casting long shadows on the asphalt. The air was cold enough to see my breath. I checked my phone, 5:57 a.m., and sighed. I must have missed the 5:50. The next bus wasn't until 7:07. I leaned back, closing my eyes for a quick nap. A soft shuffle woke me. I opened my eyes to find a young woman standing at the edge of the pool of light. She wore a pale yellow dress, its hem ragged and stained. Her dark hair hung limp around her shoulders. I rubbed my eyes, convinced I was seeing things. "Bus to Maplewood?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. I frowned. "No bus for another hour." She nodded and sat beside me with an odd grace that made the wood bench creak. I offered a nod, then sat up straighter. Moments passed in silence, punctuated only by the distant rumble of wheels on pavement. I decided to break the awkwardness. "You're up early." She glanced at her sneakers clean, but scuffed, and murmured, "Needed to get away." I hesitated, about to ask where she'd come from, when the street lamp flickered and went dark, plunging us into inky black. I jumped to my feet. "Great," I muttered, fishing my phone for its flashlight. When I shone the beam, the woman was gone. My heart hammered. The lamp sputtered back to life, and the bench sat empty. No belongings, no footprints in the gravel. Only the fading echo of her whisper. Away. I checked the time. 5:59 a.m. 2 minutes until sunrise. The 700 bus would make 2 more stops before here. I paced, unnerved. At 6:10, the unmistakable hiss of a diesel engine announced the 6 Creektown Loop bus, an off-schedule, rarely used route. I waved, and it lurched to a stop. The door swung open, I climbed aboard, paid my fare, and sat at the back. Inside, the seats were empty save for a single backpack on the row ahead. I tapped the driver's shoulder. "Sorry, but did anyone get off earlier?" "There was someone here a moment ago." He glanced at the empty bench through the windshield. "Nope." "You're the first this morning." I swallowed and sat back down. The bus rattled into motion. As we neared the next stop, the engine stuttered and died. We rolled to a halt under a street lamp that flickered like the one back at the dorm. The driver cursed and climbed down to inspect the engine. I looked out the window and froze. There on the sidewalk stood the woman in the yellow dress. She faced us, head tilted, arms limp at her sides. Her dress was soaked in mud now, her hair plastered to her face. My blood ran cold. I fumbled for the door release, but the driver was still under the hood, unaware. I opened the door and stepped out. "Hey, do you need a ride?" I called. She didn't move. I approached slowly. In the dim glow of the street lamp, I saw the stain on her dress, dark red, like dried blood. I stopped a few feet away. Then she turned. Her eyes were empty black hollows, voids that swallowed the light. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, as if her throat had been torn out. My knees buckled. "Please," I whispered, stumbling backward. "I can help you." She raised a hand, fingertips, stained the same dark red. The air behind her rippled like wet linen blowing in a breeze. Suddenly, the bus engine roared to life. The driver climbed back in, oblivious. Terrified, I darted onto the bus. The woman vanished as I slammed the door. The driver gave me a puzzled look. I'll be fine," I stammered, fumbling with the bell cord. But he didn't pull away. I realized he hadn't closed the doors behind me. I stood up. "I have to get off." He frowned. "Why, you just got on." "I need to go back," I said, voice trembling. "Now." Before he could protest, I jumped down onto the asphalt and ran, boots pounding, not daring to look back. When I reached the campus road, I risked a glance. The bus was gone, headlights swallowed by the pre-dawn gloom. I never saw her again. But for weeks afterward, every time the wind blew just right through the trees, I heard her whisper on the breeze, "Away, away." And at dawn, I avoid that lonely bus stop because I know she's waiting for someone else to join her on that final silent ride. I can still feel her gaze whenever I step into my study. The porcelain doll sits on a high shelf, half hidden in shadow. A dark-haired girl in a frilly white dress, her head tilted slightly, eyes glinting with uncanny life. I thought it was a remarkable find at the estate sale of a long-dead toy maker. But I had no idea what I was unleashing. It began 2 nights after I brought her home. I was up late finishing a manuscript when I heard a soft thump behind me. I spun around. Nothing but the empty corner where I'd placed the doll's box. I sighed and returned to my laptop. Minutes later, another thump, louder. My heart raced as I rose to investigate. She sat on the floor now, the lid of her box discarded beside her. The dress was pristine, the porcelain skin gleaming in the lamplight. I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and sighed. I must have set her down when digging through boxes. I knelt to pick her up and froze. Her head had turned to face me directly. My breath hitched. I leaned closer, toes curling on the rug. The eyes, glass and colorless, seemed to hold a depth no doll should possess. I shivered and set her back on the shelf, positioning her to face the wall. "Stop playing games," I muttered. That night, I dreamt of her. I stood in a candlelit workshop, sawdust in the air. The doll maker, an old man with sunken eyes, worked at a wooden bench, carving a face that was impossibly like mine. He paused, smiled, then pressed a cold hand against the fresh porcelain cheek. "She's almost ready," he whispered to no one. Then the doll's eyes opened. I woke with a gasp. In the morning, I stumbled into the study. The sunlight slanted through the blinds, illuminating motes in the dust. My gaze went to the shelf. The doll sat facing me. My heart froze. I crossed the room, inspected the floor. No sign she'd been below. I rubbed my temples and backed away. That evening, I decided to put her in storage. I wrapped her carefully in bubble wrap and placed her in the attic. The lid snapped shut. Relief bloomed in my chest. But around midnight, a soft lullaby drifted down the rickety stairs. It was a child's tune, tinny and dissonant, as though playing on a broken music box. My pulse thundered. I crept up the attic ladder. The lid was ajar. Inside, the doll was gone. I dashed downstairs, the lullaby guiding me to the study. There she stood, center of the room, bathed in moonlight porcelain, face turned toward the window, eyes fixed on the glowing street lamp outside. The music stopped. Silence pressed in. I wanted to scream. I charged forward, grabbed her by the shoulders, and the world tilted. My fingers brushed porcelain, but beneath that smooth surface was something else, soft skin, that yielded under pressure. The doll's head turned shoulders, shifting like a living child. She blinked, tiny lashes flickering, and smiled. A single tear, black as oil, rolled down her cheek. I stumbled back, heart pounding. "Who are you?" I gasped. She cocked her head, tilting it in an unnerving imitation of curiosity. Then she lifted one finger to her lips, as if shushing me. Her mouth twitched upward in a subtle, cold grin. I grabbed the fireplace poker and swung, but the doll vanished, leaving only the echo of ceramic on hardwood. I dropped the poker and ran chest-heaving flashlight beam, slicing through the dark house. Every room was empty, every shelf bare. The doll had dissolved into the wood grain like a ghost refusing form. I called every friend at 2 a.m., but none answered. By the time dawn broke, I convinced myself it was sleep deprivation, a prank of exhaustion. I returned to the study. On my desk lay a single porcelain foot, complete with tiny painted toes. I let out a strangled scream and dropped to my knees. Then I understood. The toy maker had been carving not dolls, but vessels, traps for souls. The soft skin beneath the porcelain belonged to a girl who'd vanished decades ago, perhaps from this very town. And now the vessel was broken, her spirit loose. I spent the next day at the library, poring over local archives. I found mention of the doll maker's wife, who disappeared without a trace in 1923. Witnesses claimed she'd grown obsessed with preserving her daughter's memory after a tragic accident. They said she buried her child in clay-smeared paint on her cheeks, bound her lips. Then the woman died by her own hand. The daughter's spirit was never laid to rest. That night, I sat in the study, the fireplace roaring. I placed the porcelain foot in a small box, sprinkled it with salt, and prayed. The house seemed to hold its breath. Hours passed in silence until at 3:03 a.m., the doll maker's lullaby began again, soft creaking as though coming from the heart of the walls. I rose and opened a window, the night air whipping into the room. "Child," I whispered, voice trembling, "go home." Behind me, something clattered. I turned to see the porcelain head severed but whole rolling toward me on the hardwood. The eyes reflected moonlight like wet stones. For a moment, I expected it to sprout legs and chase me. Instead, it came to a stop at my feet. I scooped it up, marched to the window, and hurled it into the dark garden below. Silence followed. The wind stilled. I closed the window. In the morning, I found the head shattered on the lawn porcelain fragments scattered among the rose bushes. I buried the pieces deep in the earth, hoping to entomb whatever remained of that lost girl. I tossed the music box into the river. I burned her dress in the fireplace. I still live here, haunted by what I did or didn't banish. Sometimes, late at night, I catch a glimpse of her dark eyes in the edge of my vision. And on the rare occasion I sleep past midnight, I'm awakened by the soft, mocking lullaby echoing through the silent house. I can never be sure she's gone. I never thought a phone call could unmoor you from reality until the night the landline rang in my empty apartment. I live alone on the third floor of a brick building downtown. The hallway lights hum with fluorescent flicker, and at night, the silence feels so dense you can lean against the wall and hear it breathe. I keep my cell phone by my bed, but left it charging downstairs that evening. When the landline rang at 2:02 a.m., the shrill chime echoed so loud I bolted upright. My heart pounded as I crossed the dark living room, pausing only to flip on the lamp. The phone sat on its cradle handset, trembling as it rang again. I picked it up, voice hoarse. "Hello," silence crackled on the other end. I frowned and cleared my throat. "Who is this?" A soft breath came through the receiver, ragged and uneven, like someone gasping underwater. Then a woman's voice whispered, "Are you awake?" My blood turned to ice. I looked at the clock, 2:03 a.m. My mind raced. I didn't recognize the number. Who's calling? Soft sobs on the line. It's cold. So cold. She sounded far away underwater. Her next words were muffled, as if spoken through a thick wall. "Come help me." I rubbed my eyes. It had to be a prank late-night drunk dialing. "Listen, I said you have the wrong number." The line went dead. My ear tingled where the receiver rested. I held the phone with both hands, staring at it as though it might explode. After a minute, I hung up and let the receiver rest. The silence of the apartment pressed in louder than before. I couldn't sleep. I paced the living room, turning on all the lights until they burned out, one by one. I was too jittery to notice. Around 3 a.m., I drifted back to bed, comforted by the dim glow of my phone's alarm clock. Just before drifting off, I heard the landline ring again. I bolted upright, sweat beading on my forehead. I reached for the phone hands, trembling so badly, I dropped the receiver. It hit the hardwood with a sharp crack. I froze, staring at the handset, then the desk phone itself, its red light blinking insistently. From the mess of wires, the dial tone hummed inviting. I knelt to retrieve the receiver. My fingers closed around it, and I snapped it to my ear. "Hello." This time, I heard footsteps, soft dragging pace like slow, creaking floorboards. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they seemed to circle me in the room. My skin prickled. "What do you want?" I whispered. The footsteps stopped. then a single word, home. A sliver of dread cut through me. I live here. I managed. Another whisper. Not that home. My pulse spiked. I felt as though I'd been dropped into a nightmare. Who is this? I demanded. The line went dead again. I slammed the receiver down, my knuckles white. I sat paralyzed, waiting for the next ring that never came. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me, and I fell into a restless sleep. At dawn, I convinced myself it was a prank. I unplugged the phone before leaving for work. The day passed in a blur. I told friends I'd been hearing things, and they laughed it off. But I didn't laugh. That night, I braced myself. I switched on every lamp, locked the apartment door, and left a small radio playing static. Around midnight, I sat on the sofa, eyes fixed on the dead phone. At 2:02 a.m., sharp, the radio flickered and switched off. In the sudden silence, the landline rang. I froze, sweat cold on my neck. I swiveled toward the phone. When I reached for the handset, I noticed something new. A second receiver lay beside it, the kind you'd see in an old switchboard. I'd never seen it before. My hand hovered, trembling. The ringing stopped. Silence. I exhaled, relief washing through me. Then the old receiver clicked, as though picked up, and a low voice said, "Good evening." It wasn't a woman this time, but a deep, resonant male voice that scraped like gravel. My blood turned to ice. "Who is this?" I croaked. "He called me," the voice said. "I'm here now." I bolted to my feet. "Stop this. You're scaring me." A soft chuckle rippled through the line. "You never answered us." My heart hammered. Answered what? A third voice slithered in, feminine and thin. "Why did you leave us?" Three voices, too. I didn't recognize, and one that was familiar. My mouth went dry. I backed away slowly, eyes darting to the windows, the dark corners of the room. "Get off my line." The voices spoke together now, a chorus of desperate sorrow and rage. "This is our home." I dropped the handset and bolted for the door, then stopped short. It was locked. I yanked at the knob until my hands shook and the skin tore. No give. I heard footsteps behind me, soft but many, like a group shuffling in unison. I spun around. The floorboards in the hallway outside my study window creaked under invisible weight. Shadows flickered against the walls, too many for one apartment. I dashed to the kitchen, grabbed a butcher knife, and stood trembling. The landline rang again, 3 rapid rings. The switchboard receiver clicked. I knew somewhere deep inside that if I picked it up, they'd speak as one welcome home. The ringing continued, unrelenting. Cold sweat dripped down my temples. My breath came in staccato gasps. With nowhere else to turn, I hurled the knife at the phone, severing the cable. The line snapped. The ringing halted instantly. Silence flooded the room. I dropped to my knees, hands on my ears, praying the nightmare was over. Finally, at 2:17 a.m., I drifted into a fitful sleep. When morning came, I tossed the entire phone into the dumpster outside. I changed my locks, moved my cell phone charger into the living room, and never touched the landline again. But late at night, when the wind howls through the streets, I swear I can hear them at my door, whispering my name, marching up the stairs, searching for a place they once called home. I've spent countless summers camping in the redwood forest, lured by the ancient giants and their cathedral-like stillness, until last July thought I'd grown immune to the eeriness of the pines. but nothing could prepare me for the thing that watched me from the darkness between the trunks. It began on my third night at Little Creek Campground. I'd pitched my tent beside the murmuring stream just before dusk, then settled in by the fire pit with a book. The forest around me was alive with croaking frogs and the distant cry of owls. I felt completely at ease. When the embers died, I crawled into my sleeping bag and drifted off. Around midnight, a soft scratching sound woke me. At first, I thought it was a raccoon pawing at the campsite trash can, but the scratch wasn't metal against plastic. It was rougher, like claws against bark. I unzipped the tent flap an inch and shone my headlamp toward the trees. The beam landed on a tall, thin silhouette, almost human, but too elongated. Its arms hung low, brushing the ferns at its feet. The creature's head tilted as though peering into my tent. My breath caught. I clicked the light off and retreated, heart-pounding, trying to rationalize. Probably a deer, I muttered. Deer don't stand still. But sleep wouldn't return. At 3:13 a.m., the scratching returned closer this time, like something circling the tent. I lay perfectly still, listening as the sound slid along the nylon walls. Then a whisper, sibilant, guttural, a single word repeated in a half-echo, half-sigh. Come. I froze. My mind screamed to bolt, but my body refused to move. The whisper circled again, this time at my tent door. The fabric shivered under a wet breath. My pulse thundered. I felt claws rake across the tent's exterior, puncturing the fabric in tiny tears that sprayed me with cold mist. I ripped the zipper open and shone the headlamp into the clearing. Nothing. Only the embers of my fire smoldering red and the black silhouettes of trees beyond. No creature. No footprints in the damp earth. I swallowed hard and leaned out, scanning the darkness. My light caught on a single pair of eyes, reflective yellow-green, only 60 feet away. They blinked once, then vanished. I retreated and slammed the zipper shut. In my cocoon of nylon, every crackle from the dying fire sounded like gunfire. Minutes passed, then hours with no more sounds. Exhaustion finally seized me, and I drifted into a dreamless sleep. At dawn, I emerged to find claw marks gouged into the tent's exterior, long parallel slashes that ran from ground level up almost 5 feet. The grass around the tent was trampled, bent in unnatural angles, as though something had crouched there. I packed up quickly, anxiety pulsing through my veins. Determined not to flee that easily, I headed deeper into the forest that afternoon, camera in hand. I hiked to a clearing I'd never visited before, where the trees arced overhead like stone pillars. The forest floor here was carpeted in moss, so thick it muffled every footstep. I paused to photograph a cluster of ferns, then froze at the faintest sound of laughter, high-pitched, childlike, echoing off the trunks. My skin prickled. I swung the camera around, lens clicking rapidly. A small child stood at the edge of the frame, wearing a tattered white dress, hair tangled with pine needles. Her face was pale and featureless, as though whited out. She beckoned with one hand. My legs hammered into motion. I ran camera, swinging heart, tearing at my ribs. When I burst into open meadow, I gasped for breath, drenched in sweat. I dared a glance back. The girl stood at the tree line, grinning eyes gleaming like shards of glass. Then she raised both arms above her head and began to sway in impossible motion, as though her body was a puppet on invisible strings. The camera in my trembling hand flashed, capturing her one last time before she vanished. That night, I camped miles away, too afraid to retrace the claw mark's path, but sleep eluded me. At exactly 3:13 a.m., I heard the familiar scratch outside my tent. I stayed paralyzed, waiting. The whispers began again. Countless voices this time, weaving in and out like wind in the pines. Come, come, come. I sat up and shaking. No, I whispered, not again. The tapping at the zipper started slow but insistent. I yanked it open and shone the light into my own eyes reflected in the smooth wall of the tent. My breathing froze. There, inches from my face, were two glowing yellow-green eyes, and behind them the elongated shape of the creature. Its features melted in the beam. The single limb-like hand pressed to the exterior rippled the fabric between us. I didn't wait for the rest. I tore out of that tent, stumbling into the woods, the smell of damp earth and pine choking me. Branches whipped my arms and faced blood running down my forehead. I ran until I burst onto the highway, waving down a passing car at 3:27 a.m. The driver screeched to a halt, and I dove inside, slamming the door. In the safety of the car, I looked back down the dark road. In the headlights' glare, the trees at the forest edge quivered, and I saw for a heartbeat the silhouette of that gaunt figure standing perfectly still, head cocked, watching me flee. I never returned to Redwood Forest. The pictures on my camera are grainy, distorted claw marks on my tent, the mist-shrouded figure, the featureless child. I've shown them to experts, wildlife biologists, veteran campers. None can explain what I saw, but I know the truth. Something ancient lives in those woods, something that lures the living into its shadow with whispered promises. And now, sometimes in my dreams, I'm back among the pines at exactly 3:13 a.m., hearing the scratching in the dark. I moved into my new one-bedroom on Weatherby Avenue, eager for a fresh start. The rent was cheap, the neighborhood quiet, and the building, an aging 3-story brick block, had a certain old-world charm. I met the landlady, Mrs. Carmichael, a sweet septuagenarian with rheumy eyes who warned me only, "Don't make noise after midnight." The neighbors aren't fond of visitors. I smiled and nodded, thinking nothing of it. The first week was uneventful, aside from occasional creaks and groans of settling floorboards. I worked late, returned at dawn, and collapsed into bed. Then on night 8, just as I was drifting off, I heard furniture scraping overhead, a low, grinding rumble that bounced off the ceiling. My heart fluttered. I assumed an upstairs tenant moving in. But when I checked the building directory, there was no tenant listed on the 3rd floor, only my own apartment and Mrs. Carmichael's above the ground level office. The 2nd floor held 2 families, but the 3rd was vacant, the door always locked. I crept to my bedroom door and pressed my ear to the cold wood. The scraping stopped. Silence stretched on heavy as a blanket. I tiptoed to the living room window and peered out at the parking lot below. Not a soul. Shaking, I climbed back into bed, convincing myself it was my imagination. On night 9, the room pulsed with footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth. Wood groaned, owned above me, as though something heavy was carried step by step. I grabbed my phone and texted my friend Mark, asking him to come by. Minutes later, a second noise joined a low hum like machinery powering on. Then a metallic bang, as if a door had been slammed shut right overhead. I jumped up. "Mark!" I hissed in the hallway, hoping he wouldn't take too long. I half expected to hear footsteps approach my door from above. I flinched every time the floor groaned. The banging continued rhythmically, bang, 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 followed by a stuttering hum that rose in pitch until it cracked into a high-pitched whine. I grabbed clothes and stuffed them into a duffel. I had decided to crash at Mark's apartment. Just as I slung the bag over my shoulder, a voice creaked from the ceiling. "Please, stop!" It was a child's voice, tired and pleading. My blood froze. That moment, footsteps raced down the hall light ones and stopped in front of my door. Something rapped twice. I froze, duffel in hand. "Please let me out," the voice whispered from directly above me. "I'm so cold." I backed into the kitchen and fumbled for my keys. The rapping came again. Bang, bang, then silence. My heart pounded. I considered calling Mrs. Carmichael, but fear rooted me in place. Finally, I bolted for the front door, keys jangling. I yanked it open, nearly colliding with Mark as he arrived. "What's wrong?" he asked, eyes wide at my wild expression and packed bag. Above my ceiling, I gasped. Someone's up there." He frowned. "There's no apartment above you." I shook my head. "I know, but..." I heard a child's voice, and banging, and furniture being moved. Mark's expression turned grim. "Let's ask Mrs. C." We found her in her office sipping tea behind a swinging door marked "Office" on the ground floor. She blinked at our intrusion. "Yes," she said slowly. "It's about my ceiling," I blurted. "There's someone up there in an apartment. A person I don't know." I hear a child. Her face went ashen. She set down her cup. "I was hoping you wouldn't notice." I looked from her to Mark. "Notice what?" Mrs. Carmichael sighed, gathering strength. 50 years ago, they tore out the entire third floor. It was never rebuilt. But something remained. I swallowed. "What do you mean?" She lifted a shaky hand. "During renovations in 1974, a fire broke out on that floor. It killed a mother and her little girl. Their screams, no one could reach them before the beams collapsed." She winced, eyes misting over. "The building's owner, the girl's father, sealed the floor off. He died 2 years later. The floor was left empty beneath the roof. I've kept the place running since '99, told tenants nothing. But at night you've heard, that is her." My blood ran cold. "Her." "The girl," Mrs. Carmichael said softly. "She wanders, reliving that final night. People have heard her seen something. I've lived here for decades, and I still hear her calling." We ascended to the second floor, the stairs creaking underfoot. Mrs. Carmichael unlocked the hidden stair door to the attic, what remained of the third floor. I peered inside a blackened space, charred beams jutting like broken ribs. No walls, no floorboards, just the skeletal underbelly of the roof. The faint hum of electricity overhead powered only an exit sign. Below us, the drop would be fatal. From somewhere above, a soft thump rang out. A child's voice whispered, "Mama so mournful." It cracked my heart. My eyes stung. Mrs. Carmichael placed a hand on my arm. "She's lost. She remembers the fire, the smoke, her mother's scream. She calls for help. I steadied my breath. Can we help her? Her lips trembled. I don't know. Some say you must speak her name. I swallowed. Do you know her name? She was named Lily, Mrs. Carmichael whispered. Her mother called her Lily Hart. I cleared my throat and called into the darkness. Lily, Lily, Hart. Silence stretched. Then a faint giggle, soft distant. I shone my phone flashlight upward. Its beam caught the outline of a small handprint in black soot on an overhead beam. Below it, I saw a child's silhouette pressed against the rafters, head tilted. My breath hitched, but I forced myself to speak. Lily, I'm here. You're not alone. A tiny sob echoed. Then above us, the sound of shifting rubble. I backed away as a piece of charred wood fell crashing at our feet. The air vibrated with whispering voices. Thank you. Don't forget me. I'm not alone. I looked at Mrs. Carmichael, tears in her eyes. She's at peace, she said. For now. We descended and sealed the stair door. That night, I returned to my apartment. No banging, no scraping, only quiet. I slept, albeit fitfully. Days later, when I passed the closed door, I could swear I heard distant giggles and a child's whisper trailing off. Lily Hart has a friend now. I never moved out, and every so often, when the wind rattles the building at dusk, I leave a small bouquet of daisies on my windowsill for Lily Hart, the little girl who still calls from the shadows above. I landed the overnight shift at St. Bartholomew's Hospital to cover for a colleague on leave. My usual beat was busy wards full of machines beeping and patients drifting in and out of consciousness, but Ward G, the psych unit, was different. Its long, pale green corridor felt hollow, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I shrugged off the chill and changed into my crisp white scrubs. My first night passed with little drama chart updates, medication rounds, and the occasional confused patient in need of reassurance. I finished my last paperwork at 2:15 a.m. and prepared to check the locked treatment rooms when the intercom crackled. Nurse Carter, room 17. That room lay at the end of the ward, past a gray door marked staff only. I jogged there, clipped my badge, and slipped inside. The fluorescent lights hummed. A single empty bed sat in the corner sheets neatly folded. No patient. I frowned, checked the monitor. It was offline. Hello, I called. A soft sob answered from the shadows. I rounded the bed to find a wheelchair by the wall, its wheels locked, facing the door. I leaned forward. Is someone here? Silence. Then behind me a muted thump, like a hand tapping the wall. I spun around. The window blinds rattled, though the window was sealed. I swallowed and flicked on my flashlight. Beams of white light pierced the gloom. Nothing but the wheelchair and the spotless floor. As I turned to leave, I spotted an overturned tray table. On it, scuffed footprints led into the corner. I followed them and found fresh scratches gouged into the paint, long ragged lines that cut deep. My hand flew to my chest. A soft shuffle came from beyond the curtain at the far side of the room. I drew back the fabric. No one. The cot was empty. But as I peered in, I noticed the sheets looked recently disturbed, as though someone had lain there. I reached for the call button and hit it. Nothing happened. The buzzer remained silent. Panic fluttered in my gut. I replaced the curtain and hurried out, closing the door behind me. Back in the corridor, the lights flickered. I blinked and heard the intercom crackle again. Nurse Carter, room 17. My heart skidded to a halt. I collapsed against the wall, breath gone. "I'm here," I managed. "Here." The intercom clicked off. Seconds passed. Then footsteps. Bare footsteps, soft but certain, pacing toward me from the locked door at the end of the hall. Ward G's staff door. No one had a key but the admin and security, and they were both off-site tonight. I swallowed and crept toward the door, flashlight beam bobbing. At the handle, I pressed my palm to the cold metal. The footsteps halted. A low hiss breathed through the crack beneath the door. "Help me." My blood ran ice cold. I yanked at the handle, it didn't budge. "Who?" I began. "What do you want?" No light, the voice rasped. Dark. The overhead light snapped off, plunging me into inky black. Even my flashlight went dark. I fumbled for my phone, dead. The air thickened heavy with sorrow. Then I felt it, a near-invisible presence pressing against me, as though someone stood a breath away. I stumbled backward, hands outstretched, palms grazing the wall. "I'll get you help," I whispered, voice shaking. "Just stay calm." A soft sob rippled through the darkness. Then a whisper at my ear. "Please, don't leave me." I bolted down the corridor, heart hammering. My shoes slapped wet tile, the floor was damp. The lights flickered back on, revealing footprints pooling in a shallow, glistening film that hadn't been there moments before. I didn't stop to inspect them. I charged to the nurse's station and punched in the emergency override code. The locked door beeped and clicked open. I ripped it open and sprinted inside. The air was frigid, my breath misting. Beyond the metal gate lay room 17, its pale green walls streaked with darkness. The wheelchair sat where I'd left it. I advanced with my flashlight, its beam slicing through the gloom. The scraping sound started again somewhere behind the operating room curtain. I yanked it aside, expecting an agitated patient, but found only the empty examination table. On its surface lay a crumpled gown drenched in water, a hospital ID pin. I picked it up gingerly. Room 17, name Eleanor Wren. I recognized the name from the patient roster. She'd been admitted 5 nights ago for acute psychosis, no known visitors. The lights flickered, and in that flicker, I saw her. A gaunt, pale form hovering at the far wall, head cocked unnaturally. Her hospital gown clung to her ribs. Her eyes were black voids. In the next instant, she was gone, but her sorrow-filled sob echoed, bouncing off the tiled walls. I dropped the pin as though it burned my hand and fled. I didn't stop until I reached the lobby, gasping under the neon sign that read, "Emergency." I called security with my cell. Within minutes, officers and admin arrived. But when we returned with flashlights, room 17 lay pristine, no footprints, no scratches, no wet floor. The wheelchair and tray table were back in their original positions. The hospital gown and ID pin vanished. I reported the incident in my shift notes and requested transfer. The next day, I handed in my resignation. When HR asked why, I told them simply I couldn't stay. But even now, I can't shake her voice, the hollow plea in the dark. At odd hours and quiet moments, I hear her whisper through my phone's voicemail, "Help me. Don't leave me." I never listen. When I accepted the night shift receptionist job at St. Helena's Hotel, I imagined quiet nights behind the desk, checking in guests, answering late calls, and maybe sneaking an episode of my favorite show between lullaby hours. I never expected to become part of the guest list. On my third night, at precisely 3:12 a.m., the phone at the front desk rang. Its tone was old-fashioned and mechanical, like something out of a rotary phone era. I picked up. "Front desk?" I said, voice bright despite the hour. A low, raspy voice replied, "Room 312. I frowned. "I'm sorry, but guests use their in-room phones to call." "This is the front desk." Silence. Then with effort, the voice rasped, "Help me." My blood ran cold. I checked the log. Room 312 was vacant. The previous occupant checked out that morning. I punched the button for housekeeping. No response. The hallways beyond the lobby were unnervingly still, lights dimmed to conserve energy. I set the receiver down and called security. "There's a call from 312, I whispered, but no guest registered. Seconds later, the intercom crackled. "Front desk." I lifted the handset again. "Yes." "Where are you?" the voice whispered, closer now, so close I felt its breath rasp against my ear. "Ma'am," I said. "I'm at the front desk." "No," the voice hissed. "I'm here." My skin prickled. I glanced at the long corridor leading to the elevator. On the wall, golden numerals marked each floor. I swallowed hard. I keyed the elevator to floor 3. The doors slid open with a reluctant whoosh. No one was inside. The overhead speaker crackled with static, but I tuned it out and stepped in. The doors closed behind me as soon as my hand left the button. At 3:14 a.m., I stepped onto the third-floor hallway carpet, muted beneath my feet. Room 312's door gleamed at the far end, polished brass numbers reflecting the dim overhead lights. I approached, heart-hammering fingers itching to turn the knob. The door was slightly ajar. I hesitated, then pushed it open. Inside the suite was silent, elegant, but empty. I flicked on the light, king-size bed leather armchair minibar untouched. No sign of a guest. I clicked my flashlight around. The ensuite bathroom mirror reflected a flicker at the window, a shape that vanished the instant I blinked. I cleared my throat. Housekeeping. No answer. My phone buzzed in my pocket, security asking for an update. I bit my lip and stepped toward the window to peer out. The blackout curtains were drawn, but the edges parted as if nudged by an unseen hand. Beyond the courtyard was a slate mosaic of moonlit tiles and shadowed archways. A soft scrape sounded behind me. I spun. On the bed lay a single sheet of hotel stationery, inked with neat handwriting. "Thank you for finding me. I can't leave." My heart pounded so loud, I thought the entire silent wing would hear it. I reached for the paper, but it vanished, dissolving into a curl of black smoke that drifted across the floor. The temperature plummeted, and I saw my breath mist in front of me. Then from somewhere deep in the closet, a low moan, long, mournful, like a wounded animal. I backed away just as the overhead light flickered. In the darkness, I felt rather than saw a figure glide toward me. It stopped a few feet away, indistinct all shadow. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. My flashlight sputtered and died. In the oppressive blackness, the moan rose into a keening wail. I pressed my back against the door, fumbling for my phone to call security. But the handset slipped from my sweaty fingers, clattering somewhere unseen. A whisper brushed my ear. "Don't go." I froze, vision swimming. The wail ceased. Instead, the room filled with the quiet tapping of nails on the floor toward me, one deliberate click at a time. My breath caught as the tapping stopped right below me. My foot, the only part of me still illuminated by the pale light seeping through the curtains, felt something brush against it, cold and clammy. I bolted, yanking the door open. The hallway light sprang back on, just as my shoulder slammed into the frame. I ran down the corridor, the elevator doors yawning open in my wake. I jumped inside, stabbed at the lobby button, and fled to the front desk. By the time security arrived, I was pacing the lobby like a caged animal. They searched room 312, found nothing. The door was locked from the inside. No smudged prints, no disturbances, no sign anyone had been there. Hotel records confirmed no occupant had checked in or out of 312 in months. It must have been a prank, one guard said, though his voice lacked conviction. I shook my head. It wasn't anyone here. It came from inside the building. The phone. The figure. Words failed me. They escorted me off duty and insisted I take the rest of the week off. I collected my things and left, never looking back. But sometimes, when I pass a hotel lobby or hear the shrill ring of an old landline, I catch myself at exactly 3:12 a.m., heart pounding. And I remember that voice in room 312 begging, "Help me. I can't leave." And I wonder how many nights it has waited for someone brave or foolish enough to answer again. I used to think of my old ham radio hobby as harmless a soothing ritual of tuning dials and listening to distant chatter crackling through the static. My basement workshop was lined with tubes and antennas, and at night I'd sit for hours coaxing out voices from across the ether. That all changed on the evening I received the last transmission. It was a rainy Wednesday in late October. The thunder rolled overhead, rattling the windows, as I descended the narrow stairs to the workshop. I flipped the switch on my primary receiver and watched the vacuum tubes glow orange. Static hissed in my earpiece, white noise, comforting in its own way. I thumbed the tuning knob, scanning the 80-meter band for open frequencies. Between the gaggle of regular operators chatting about weather and current events, something new pressed through a faint, rhythmic voice buried beneath the hiss. I leaned forward, adjusting the fine-tuned capacitor. Help! Please. My pulse quickened. The voice was faint, a woman's whisper so weak, I questioned whether my mind was playing tricks. I scribbled the time, 9:47 p.m., and focused the filters. The static dissipated slightly, and the voice sharpened. "Phone, can you hear me?" I sat bolt upright. Yes, I answered into the microphone, though amateur radio etiquette discouraged conversations with unidentified callers. But this wasn't casual chatter. It was a plea. Another crackle, then words that froze my blood. There, in the walls. My workshop walls were concrete, a basement room dug beneath my house. No one else had a legal reason to be down here. My breath caught in my throat. Who is this? I whispered into the mic voice, trembling. Silence. Only the hum of the fluorescent tubes overhead. Then through the static, at night, they listen. The walls, they breathe. A low pop, like a door sliding shut. The line went dead, replaced only by static. I stared at the receiver in stunned silence. Had I imagined it? A prank from another ham operator? But the tone had been desperate real. I keyed the mic again. "Hello, are you there?" Static. Then unmistakable, the faint sound of scratching like nails scoring plaster. It came from inside my workshop walls. My heart hammered. I rose and pressed my ear to the concrete. The scratching continued slow, deliberate. I ignored the scientific impossibility and knocked back. "Who's there?" Silence. Then find the door. My skin crawled. I backed away, stumbling into my workbench. Among soldering irons and circuit boards, I noticed something odd. One of the concrete panels in the north wall sported an irregular seam. I'd never noticed it before. My breath caught. I crossed to it, running a fingertip along the crack. It was a hairline gap, almost imperceptible. My pulse raced. I grabbed a flashlight, the beam trembling, and shone it at the seam. The light caught on a small metal ring bolted to the panel. A hidden door. I swallowed hard, mind spinning. Part of me screamed to flee back upstairs, but curiosity and that pleading voice drew me closer. I grasped the ring and gave it a yank. A grinding stone on metal sound answered, and the panel shuddered inward. A narrow passage opened no more than 2 feet wide, leading into inky darkness. The stale, damp air exhaled from the void, carrying the smell of mildew and something fouler decay. My breath trembled as I stepped over the threshold, flashlight in hand. Behind me, the door creaked closed, sealing me inside. The beam danced across the tunnel's concrete walls, streaked with black mold and dotted with rusted pipes. Water trickled somewhere far ahead. As I ventured deeper, the tunnel sloped downward. I passed scraps of paper pinned to the walls, faded newspaper clippings about missing persons, poverty-stricken beggars, women fleeing abusive husbands, all dated decades ago. Beneath each clipping, in smeared charcoal, someone had scrawled a name and date. My blood ran cold as I recognized a photograph of a woman I'd seen in a missing persons gallery online. The date, October 3rd, 1998. 30 years ago. Tears burned in my eyes. The voice returned tinny in my headset. "Find me." I followed the whispers, echoing off the damp concrete. They grew louder, urgent, sorrowful, until I reached a low, bricked-up alcove about 10 feet from where I'd entered. The charcoal names clustered here, dozens of them, overlapping in a tangle of desperation. The radio crackled one last time. They took me. I swallowed hard, stepping closer. My flashlight illuminated the alcove floor, shallow depressions, imprints of human bodies. I knelt and touched the concrete. It felt newly disturbed. A sudden echo caught my attention. Someone walking behind me. I spun just in time to see the door at the tunnel's mouth slide open, sealing with a hollow thud. My heart vaulted. I jammed my fist on the wall where the ring had been. Nothing. The seam had vanished. No crack, no ring, just smooth concrete. Panic clawed at my chest. The voice in my headset whispered again, closer, directly in my ear. "Join us." I yanked the headset off and darted back the way I'd come, stumbling over debris. The tunnel stretched endlessly darkness, bending my sense of direction. My flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into pitch black. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket, inhaling sharply when it wasn't there. Then I felt it strapped to my belt. I clicked on the screen light and raised it. The beam was narrow, but enough to guide me. I sprinted, screaming the entire time, sweat and tears stinging my eyes. At last, I saw the faint glow of the workshop's fluorescent lights ahead. I burst through the hidden door, slamming it shut behind me. The concrete panel resealed itself, the ring lost once more. I collapsed, gasping on the cold floor. Never reported the tunnel or the voices. Who would believe me? The next day, I dismantled my radio equipment, sold off the rest, and moved out. I donated the receiver and the memory of that final, desperate call to a local museum of communications. A week later, I found a crumpled piece of notebook paper in my pocket. In hurried scrawl were 3 words: "Don't forget us." To this day, I can't explain the tunnel, the names on the walls, or the voices that came through the static. But sometimes when I tune an old radio to the 80-meter band just as white noise fills the speaker, I swear I hear them again, whispering from beneath the earth. Help us. Don't forget. I thought driving back home from my friend's lakeside cabin at 3:03 a.m. was mundane, just 5 hours behind the wheel through moonlit highways and sleepy towns. But midway down Route 47, I realized I wasn't alone. I just crossed the county line when I noticed movement in my rearview mirror. At first it was the usual, the headlights of a distant car weaving behind me. But then the lights faded, and in their place, I saw something else. The silhouette of a person, tall, slender, standing behind my car, reflected perfectly in the mirror. My heart lurched. I slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched against the asphalt. I peered into the mirror. The road behind was empty. No headlights, no figure, nothing. I exhaled shakily and eased forward, assuming fatigue had played tricks. 20 minutes later, the sensation returned, stronger this time. In the mirror, I saw the same lanky outline eyes glowing faintly in the dark. But when I glanced up at the back seat through the cabin mirror, it wasn't there. I jerked my head side to side, searching, but only the empty seat rails greeted me. My pulse hammered as I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Get real," I muttered. Yet the figure followed me, matching my every curve, and straightaway, always closing the gap until it filled the mirror's frame. I reached for my phone to turn on the map light and froze. A message glowing on the lock screen: "Don't look back." My blood ran cold. I didn't recognize the number. I hadn't checked my phone since leaving the cabin. My hands shook as I swiped to dismiss it. Then the mirror rippled. The figure tilted forward as though peering into my soul. I gasped and yanked the wheel, veering onto the gravel shoulder. The tires rattled through stones. I killed the engine and threw the car into park. In the moonlight, the world seemed unnaturally still. I opened the driver's door, step out, and walk to the rearview mirror on the doorframe. I looked behind me, only the dark expanse of highway stretching into the night. No headlights, no figure. I faced the mirror itself and cocked my head. There reflected a man in a tattered black suit, face obscured by shadow, standing inches behind me. My stomach clenched. I yanked my head back. No one was there. Panic set in. I rushed to the passenger side and climbed in, locking all doors. My mind raced. I debated calling 911, but what would I say? There's a ghost in my mirror. Slowly, I gathered my nerves, started the engine, and merged back onto the highway. Eyes fixed on the road, refusing to glance behind me again. For the next half hour, nothing happened. I convinced myself it was exhaustion. Imagination stirred by the late hour. Then my phone buzzed again. I stole a glance. He's here. My heart skipped a beat. I gripped the wheel knuckles white. I slowed to 30 miles per hour, scanning the road ahead for anything, but the highway was deserted. My headlights cut through the night, revealing only stretches of black tarmac and swaying roadside grass. Suddenly, the passenger side rearview mirror exploded inward with a thunderous crack showering me with glass. My scream tore through the cab. I swerved wildly, crossing the median and coming to a halting stop in the opposite lane. The engine died and silence reclaimed the night. Shaking uncontrollably, I reached over and pressed the unlock button for the doors. Before the locks disengaged, I dared to peer into the broken mirror. In the jagged shards, I saw him, the shadowed figure, now filling the fragmented reflections, eyes gleaming with cold malice. He raised a hand, and in the main shard closest to me, I saw my own terrified face lit by dashboard lights. Then, the shards rattled as though something breathed on them. A low whisper brushed my ear. "It's not over." I jolted, slamming the door locks back down. My phone buzzed one final time, never looked back. I floored the accelerator tires, screeching, and sped away into the darkness, tears blurring the road ahead. I didn't stop until I reached the city limits. Days later, I took the car to a mechanic. He handed me the side mirror assembly, shattered to pieces. I asked what could cause such damage. He shrugged. "Might have been a rock. Maybe you hit something hard." I didn't correct him. I paid the bill, drove home, and parked the car in my garage, doors locked, lights off. At night, I avoid Route 47, and whenever I pass a mirror, I glance only at my own reflection, never what lurks behind me, because I know he's still out there waiting to reclaim his place in my rear view. I never imagined how claustrophobic an empty subway station could feel. Late last winter, I was freelancing as a transit photographer, documenting disused urban spaces for a small magazine. My final assignment was the old Halcyon station, closed for 30 years after a catastrophic tunnel collapse. I arrived on a frigid Monday at midnight, camera bag slung over one shoulder, thrilled to capture rusted turnstiles and peeling mosaic tiles. The elevator to the platform level groaned as if protesting my visit. When the doors hissed open, I stepped into near total darkness, armed only with the weak beam of my LED headlamp. The platform stretched away in both directions, vanishing into blackness. I clicked on my camera's flash to reveal dusty benches, a shattered ticket booth, and half buried in debris, an old enamel sign reading, "To Downtown," with an arrow pointing into the gloom. I set up my tripod on the yellow safety line and began shooting. Each flash illuminated the tunnel, revealing walls pocked with bullet holes and graffiti dating back to the 1980s. My breath misted in the frigid air. The silence was complete until I heard the soft clack of rails, like a train approaching. My heart skipped. "Impossible," I muttered. The station's tracks were sealed at both ends. I raised my camera and clicked the shutter, capturing the empty tunnel mouth. When the flash faded, the station plunged back into darkness. I waited nothing, just the echo of my own breathing. I chalked it up to the wind rattling the distant grates and continued shooting. But every few minutes, that steady clack, clack, clack returned, always from deeper in the tunnel. It never grew louder, never closer, just a rhythmic tapping that strobed the darkness like a warning. An hour later, I repositioned my tripod near the platform's center, where the tile floor was cracked. Kneeling to photograph a gnarled turnstile, I glanced up at the tunnel entrance and froze. A faint glow spilled from the tunnel beyond the reach of my headlamp. Pale sulfurous light, like the dying embers of a huge bonfire. I stood and called out, voice echoing through the void. Hello, is someone there? No answer. Only the soft clack of the rails tapping in time with my racing pulse. The glow deepened, resolving into a train headlight, a single beam, low to the tracks, sweeping side to side. I stumbled backward, dread washing over me, but the headlight didn't advance. Instead, it flickered, died, then flickered on again, farther down the tunnel, as though moving just out of sight. I backed up to the edge of the platform. The tapping stopped. Silence swallowed the station. My jaw clenched. Logically, I knew there was no track connection, but my gut screamed that I was not alone. I fumbled for my phone to capture video, hands shaking. The screen wouldn't turn on. I cursed under my breath and switched off my headlamp, plunging into darkness. The platform lights remained dead, their orange globes shattered or missing. The train headlight pulsed again in the tunnel farther away, but I could see the glare reflecting off a figure standing between the rails. I raised my camera flash and fired. The burst revealed a man in a threadbare conductor's uniform, slumped shoulders, wide-brimmed cap, tipped low face obscured in shadow. His gaunt hand rested on the headlight's glass, as if restraining it. When the light faded, the station was empty once more. No train, no conductor, nothing but my own echoing breath. I rubbed my eyes and checked the shot on the camera's LCD. The tunnel was black, save for a pair of glowing eyes staring back at me. I spun, but the platform behind me was deserted. A sudden rumble shook the ground. I staggered as the signal board above flickered to life, though it had been long dead. The display scrolled in stuttering neon letters, "Last train arriving now, all aboard." My heart slammed in my chest. I raced for the stairs, but as I passed the old payphone booth, the receiver whipped off its cradle and slammed against the metal backboard, ringing loudly in the silent station. I covered my ears, painful, impossible, and the receiver fell at my feet, cord tangled like a snake. I fled up the staircase, pounding footsteps, chasing me from below 2, 4, 6, running in perfect time. I made the final step and burst into the elevator lobby. The elevator's doors were pried open, hanging us askew on their tracks. When I backed away, the doors ground shut on their own, plunging me into pitch darkness. I flipped on my phone flashlight, finally alive, and forced the doors open by hand. The stairs to the surface were just beyond. I bolted upward, breath burning in my lungs. At the top, I slammed the exit door behind me, deafened by the city's nocturnal roar. I turned back. The sign above the doorway glowed faintly, Halcyon Station, though no lights inside were on. That night, I called every transit authority I could imagine. None had records showing trains in or out since the collapse in 1993. Local historians scoffed at my photos until I showed them the conductor's uniform, identical to that worn by the station master who died in the wreck. I've never returned. But sometimes, in the dead hours, say 3:03 a.m., I wake to the sound of phantom rails beneath my window. And in the darkness of my apartment, I swear I can see a faint headlight beam crawling across the walls, accompanied by soft, desperate tapping, clack, clack, clack. I never meant to trespass on that old family plot, but curiosity has a way of dragging you into places you shouldn't go. I was in my hometown of Millfield for a high school reunion, and nostalgia led me past the wrought iron gates of Greenwood Cemetery. A new moon hung low in the sky, and the only illumination came from my flashlight's narrow beam. I had no business. There, everyone said, the place was haunted by generations of the Winthrop family, whose crypt stood in the cemetery's farthest corner. Their mausoleum was a grim Grecian temple, its marble facade stained by rain and lichen. Rumor held that Lucinda Winthrop, the last of her line, perished in 1921, under suspicious circumstances. Folks whispered her spirit still wandered among the tombs, whispering names in the dark. Laughed at the superstition. Armed with my camera and recorder, I planned to debunk the stories for my local history blog. I parked beside the caretaker's shed, its window's dark door padlocked and slipped between headstones toward the mausoleum. The gravel crunched underfoot. My flashlight revealed names and dates, generations of Winthrops, all sharing the same family crest of crossed roses. I paused at a child's marker, Agnes, 1918 to 1919. Tiny rusted toys lay at its base, a metal soldier, a porcelain doll's foot. My heart thudded. I brushed them aside and snapped a photo. The flash illuminated the tombstone's inscription, "Sleep softly, sweet Agnes, until mother calls." A chill ran down my spine. I pressed forward. At the mausoleum, the steps were slick with moss. The heavy bronze door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open on its creaking hinges, and a wave of stale air greeted me. Inside, the walls were lined with niches, hundreds of them, each bearing a nameplate and skull-shaped ring. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, flickering feebly. I clicked my recorder on. Beckoning from beyond, I muttered, imitating a cheesy documentary host. I trained my flashlight on the central sarcophagus at the room's heart. Its lid was carved with the name Winthrop, flanked by grieving angels. On the sarcophagus lay a folded piece of yellowed paper, weighted down by a solitary rose petal. No footprints led to it, just the visitor's path I'd made. I hesitated, then picked up the paper. It was a letter, written in spidery pencil. "My dearest Agnes, the shadows grow long, and I fear the night has taken you. I placed your rose by mother's resting place, so we may speak once more. Lucinda." My breath caught. Lucinda writing to her dead daughter. I scanned the letter for a date just July 3rd, 1921. Then I noticed something scrawled along the margin in a different hand. "She waits below." A rasping sound echoed behind me. I spun. The door had swung shut on its own, plunging the room into gloom, broken only by the dying bulb. My flashlight flickered. I threw the letter onto the sarcophagus and back toward the door locked. The bronze surface was cold beneath my fingertips. Behind me, the rasp grew louder. Now a series of soft knocks, knock, 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 coming from the niches along the wall. I aimed, beamed the skull, rings on each niche trembled one by one, rotating outward as though an invisible hand sought to free them. My chest tightened. I fumbled for my phone, but it lay on the floor where I dropped it. Then the knocking stopped. Silence pressed in. I exhaled slow until I heard the clear, childlike whisper of my name, James. My heart leaped. I whirled toward the voice. My flashlight found a small alcove beneath the sarcophagus. The letter I'd thrown lay at its entrance, and beyond it, the niche faces lay open, empty space, yawning behind them. A pale glow bled from the darkness, soft, unnatural. I raised the flashlight higher. In the alcove's back shadow stood a little girl in a faded white dress, hair mussed eyes, black voids. her lips curled in a hesitant half smile. My recorder, still running at my pocket's edge, began to scoot its red rec light. "Agnes," I whispered, voice cracking. She tilted her head and took a step forward. The glow intensified, revealing the scalloped edges of her dress and the faded ribbon on her wrist, identical to the photograph by her grave marker. Behind her, the niches remained open, their rings pointing outward like beckoning fingers. "I'm here," she said softly. Her voice was brittle, like dried petals between pages. "She called me." I stumbled backward. "Mother Lucinda." Agnes lifted a finger to her lips, then pressed her hand against the stone sarcophagus. The carvings shifted beneath her palm, the name Winthrop warping in to join us. My vision swam. A sudden crash echoed. The bulb above shattered, plunging the room into darkness. I froze, the only light coming from Agnes's glow. She lifted the letter from the sarcophagus and extended it toward me. The handwriting had changed. The signature now read, "Lucinda and Agnes." A chorus of soft voices rose from the niches, mothers weeping children, calling all mingled in a single heartbeat of sorrow. "Please," they whispered in trembling unison. "Stay with us." My legs buckled. Panic seared through me. I lunged for the door handle and yanked. It swung open onto the moonlit courtyard. I tumbled out, scrambling down the steps, the voices chasing me down the path until I reached the cemetery gate. I stumbled onto the empty street, heart pounding. I didn't stop running until headlights blinded me at a nearby intersection. A truck screeched to a halt. I threw my arms up like a child begging for rescue. The driver leapt out alarmed as I collapsed against his bumper. Between gasps, I tried to explain my words, tumbled out the letter, the glowing girl, the whispering graves. He helped me into his cab and drove me home. In the trembling light of dawn, I retrieved my recorder and played back the night's audio. Between the static, I heard the little girl's voice. "Join us, James. Join us." I deleted the recording, crumpled the letter, and left the cemetery's story untold. I've never gone back. But sometimes when the wind rustles through the rose bushes in my yard, I hear a faint tapping knock, 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 and a soft child's voice calling my name. And I wonder if Lucinda's last plea was meant for me all along, to lay down with her daughter, to become another whisper among the graves.